I didn't introduce myself on purpose a minute ago because I was going to do that now. So my name's Rachel and I run the Prickleback Urchin Hedgehog Rescue with my husband Jason. We're a really small home-based rescue. We started in 2021. We never meant to be a rescue. In fact, we actively said we weren't ever going to do this. So we're definitely weren't people who went in going, I want to run a hedgehog rescue. We found a hedgehog was how we ended up starting, a bit like most people do. But when we first started, there was myself, Jason, and my friend Natalie, who lives in the same village. And we started off as a little unincorporated association, sort of very quietly. We're now, we're the only rescue in about a 35-40 minute drive, so in the middle of Rutland, and our nearest is probably Peterborough. There's one further up towards Lincoln and Grantham area, and across to Leicestershire Wildlife Hospital. So we're kind of isolated in the middle of nowhere, really. We do about 125 hedgehogs a year on average, and we both work full-time. So I'm a full-time clinical audiologist by trade, and my husband's a dog walker. So although it's a small number, it still amazes me how we managed to fit that in between everything else. But a bit like all of us, we all do exactly this. So we became wildlife care badge holders it was the 23rd of February, I looked, Alana, in 2023, and we were the 22nd badge holders at the time. So that's sort of where we are now. So how it started. So how we ended up really engaging with our vets, because that's what today is really about. So I want to give you a flavour of how we ended up, I think, and I'm so grateful to be in a really good position with our vets, because it was never really planned. And it's only when you look back that you can realise actually some of the things that we've been doing or have done that have allowed this sort of fostered relationship to develop to the stage it is now. But at the time, we were feeling our way. So when it first started, we found a hedgehog, and typically everyone was full. It was also COVID, and trying to get places and those sorts of things were difficult. And our vet, who's our pet vet, happily said, well, I don't know anything about hedgehogs, Rachel, but I'll happily work with you as long as we can ask other people for advice, and we'll see how it goes. And to be fair, that was the fatal flaw, because if he'd actually said no, or I'm not willing to work with you in a hedgehog, or anything along those lines, then none of this would ever have started. We wouldn't exist, and I might be sane, but I might not. So our lovely vet, we started off with this one, but like all these things, he and other people locally were kind of like, oh, if you've got one, we've got another one. Could you just possibly, and maybe you could have this hedgehog. Because of my background, so my background is, as I say now, audiology, but previously I was a head teacher and I was an executive head of 3 schools at one point. So working within that type of environment, I'm used to being really accountable. I'm used to looking and sort of over my shoulder at what other people are expecting me to do, and what the law says, and what the guidance says, and what am I allowed to do. So when we first started, we realised that, hang on a minute, there is this need. It is such a long way to get to other rescues. There is a big gap in our local area. My first sort of thought was to look and think, well, what do we need? Because surely we can't do this. That was my, surely we're not allowed to just take wild animals and look after them, and that can't be right. And of course, as we all know, there is very little in place around preventing anybody saying or doing something with wildlife, as long as you stick within certain guidelines. And there wasn't that legislation. And I talked to the vet about it, and he said, well, he was unaware of anything that was there as well. So we both kind of looked at each other and went, well, maybe we can start to work with them. So we were quite horrified, and he was quite surprised that there wasn't that legislation there either. I suppose we both kind of went a little pale at the idea. So after panicking about that accountability and wondering what the law was, we then thought, right, okay, we'll be brave. So we started off, obviously, as we all do with our training and thinking, right, where can we go? What training can we access? A little bit difficult, COVID, other things. But we went and did, as I think lots of people who work with hedgehogs do, we went to Vale first of all, and we went to do the first face-to-face Vale course after COVID. And we came back from that Vale course, and I'm not kidding you, the first thing we said was, we're never running a rescue, and I'm never being a charity, and no, I am not doing it, which I think is probably a healthy position to take in. And when I spoke to my vet afterwards, he said, well, what did you think? I said, no, we're not doing it. It's just too big and too scary, and I don't want to do it. And that was the position we stayed for about 3 months, until we found a hedgehog and somebody else. As you can imagine, it sort of built from there. So we'd been having these conversations with our vet quietly on the side. It had grown in momentum, really, from him watching us being really frightened of doing something wrong, but us being really sort of naive, and also knowing that we didn't have the skills and the training, and we didn't know what was entailed, to watching us find out a little bit about it. And I'm really glad now I was as honest with him as I was, and that we both were around feeling worried about becoming a rescue. Because I think, looking back, it was, and I appreciate this wouldn't be the same for a lot of people, which is why we said this was more of a case study. It meant that he watched us grow and he watched us develop. And nothing builds trust quite so well as watching someone's journey. I think that is an interesting thing. So when we then sort of thought, right, actually, we do feel brave enough, we have got some knowledge, we need to get some mentorship, and we explained to him about reaching out to another rescue and trying to get some hours under our belt and trying to get some support, so that we had some more experience before we really sort of took off. And he was really supportive of that, and they were aware of what we were doing. But the whole time I kept saying, if we do this, will you be there? Will you work with us? How do you feel about being with us? And I hadn't realised how much for them actually having hedgehogs is really a bit of burden's the right. I don't mean a burden in a bad way, because they don't feel it like that at all. But for them, they're a bit, hedgehog. It's like the hot potato, isn't it? Who can I pass it to as quick as I possibly can? Because I don't really want it in my practice, and I'm not really sure what I'm doing either. So looking back, he probably was thinking, good, keep going, Rachel, keep going, because if you do this, this will solve a problem for us. But it just felt like he was interested, and that was really, really vital. So we had that sort of principle in agreement, and we were aware of the wildlife care badge sort of right on the peripheral and things starting there. We hadn't even spoken to Alana. We just looked at the few things that were starting to come up on social media about it. And we talked to him about, there were other ways that we could try and get things in place. And again, everything's sort of drip feeding. I think that's what's been so important to us, because my opinion, really firmly, and all of us, I'm sure, here, because of the way we do work, is without a vet, there is no rescue. Unless you've got veterinary support, there is no rescue. So for us, having that was key before we sort of got too far down the line. And we've always seen it as our priority to have that professional respect for them, of course, but also I've put at the bottom there, professional safety. And what I mean by that is that they're taking a huge leap of faith to work with us. They really are opening themselves up to criticism. They're putting themselves in a position where they're not always on as comfortable ground, because it's, as we all know, hard to find a vet who is actually specifically got a specialism in wildlife, and certainly the species you may be working with. So it was that leap of professional faith, and we've always tried to work and see it as our sort of priority to make them feel as safe as possible in working with us. So the demonstrating and the openness really gently built up as we went along. So I'll give you a little story, because this sticks in my mind. So one of the directors of the vet that we work with, our main vet, we attended with a hedgehog quite early on. They asked us to come and collect one. And yeah, absolutely. Toddled off up to the vets. And when we were there, he'd said, right, well, I've checked this, I've done this. And he said, so I think I'm going to prescribe this and whatever the injection was. And he said, so I'm going to give it an injection of this now. And we were still in those early days. And I said, that's great. Can I do the injection? And I never forget the look on his face. He wasn't a vet that was our one that was working with us most of the time. It was sort of his boss. And he looked at me and he went, oh yeah, I suppose, yes. And I said, well, I'd really appreciate it because I have done this with a mentor, I've done this on training, but actually I'd really like you to watch how I do an injection. I'd really like, and he went, absolutely. And he said, this is the really strangest thing. So because nobody's ever asked me that before. No one's ever said, can I do that? And again, I was shaking like a leaf, you can imagine. I'm thinking, why on earth did I just say, can I do that injection in front of the clinical director of this group? But actually, it was a really important, powerful moment because it was me saying, look, I'm not sure, could you give me any advice? And him saying, actually, that's great to have that openness. And then over the coming weeks and months with them, as we realised we need to do things properly, we need to have paperwork in place. And I've just put a little, I mean, we all have our own admission forms, don't we, in different ways, but that's our little sort of initial triage form. We started creating those procedures, and each time we did, we started to say to the vets, look, could you use this form, or could you make sure you collect this information? And we tried to make it as easy as possible for them by printing things out, giving them things in a way that they could either manipulate or use. And we used to turn up in the early days with printed off sort of wallets of, here are a whole load of admission forms with our heading on, if you're happy to use them. Because and in the beginning, it isn't a labour for them. It's nothing they have to really think about, and they can use them if they want to or not if they don't. And now they just print them out happily. They've got them on PDF. They just roll them off whenever they need them. And it's the little sort of bit in the beginning where we tried not to sort of say, we need this because of X, Y, and Z, because I need to be able to trace the finder. I need to be able to make sure that it goes back to the correct place. But we tried to sort of, I suppose, slide things in as much as possible for them. We drip fed what we were up to. So we regularly used to just give them a little update on, oh, I've just done this training, or I've just been to do this, or I've just been to see here. And I'm sure sometimes they, bless them, weren't interested. But by doing that, it just sort of kept them aware that there was a development sort of going through. When it came to being a bit more formal, just before we put ourselves out there and said, right, we're doing this in a bigger way, we drafted we knew we needed to have our SOP in place and our procedures in place with the vet. We knew that was something we wanted to have anyway. And we knew if we went forward for the badge, we would need to make sure we had things in place. And again, it felt strange, but actually in the end, I took examples and I drafted that for them from lots of different, I asked lots of other people if they'd share, and then they could tweak and change it so it became the document they were happy with, because of course it's their agreement to work with us. And it felt very odd, me being the person to help draft that. But actually, I think that's a real trick in a lot of what we do as rescues, is we have the passion to make sure these things are going to get put into place. We know it's what we need, so make it easy for them. And when it came to then saying, right, we're going to get ready and we're going to do the badge, then of course those were already done. Social media is a really powerful tool, as we all know, be a really dangerous tool, again, as we all know. But we've always tried to work in a way with our social media that the tone and the presentation and what we put on there, I have a little saying in my head, is what would, if they were sat on my shoulder, what would our vet or our veterinary nurses, what are they going to think when they read that? Because again, it comes back to that professional safety, but also it's so important, isn't it, to make sure that they're happy with the tone of what we're putting, because they're putting their name to our rescue. They're happy to say we work with, and we are the vets that work alongside this rescue. So although it's not explicit, there's no guidelines in place between us over who says what. We try to approach it in that way, that I'm almost an extension of their reputation. And that can be tricky because we have moments, don't we, where we all want to say things. But I try to run it in that sort of way. And you never know who's watching you. So we had a moment with another vet where we went in to collect a hedgehog from them. And the vet in question is somebody who I would respect and know, and really I wanted them to know what we were up to. And they said, so I've been watching what you're up to. You've really grown, haven't you, in these couple of years? And it was, for me, I felt really validated that she'd watched what we were doing, she'd noticed what we were doing, and I had no idea she even knew what we were up to, but she'd clearly been surreptitiously watching what was going on with the rescue. So you never know who's watching you, is my other bit that I've discovered. So then taking that relationship forward, over time, it's really felt like we've become part of the team, not just with the vets where we, our main vet that underwrites what we do and works with us and is our prescribing vet, but actually with several vets. We do have two in particular that we really, really closely work with, but we do feel like part of the team. When I was asked to sort of reflect on how we've got our positive relationship and how we are the way we are with the way the vets and pricklebacks all work together, I thought, gosh, I feel really manipulative. Because what I hadn't sort of stopped to think about was, in becoming part of the team, the way we've done that is we're very much, when we're visiting the vets, when we're talking to them, we almost absorb ourselves into what they're doing. So we will notice those little things when we walk in and stop and say to somebody, you know, it looks like you're having a bad day. Or if we're talking in the waiting room, we're really mindful of the tone that we're using. We're quite openly praise the vets, the support, the admin team, quite loudly, openly, because they do a really tough job, and we all know that, and we all do tough jobs, but they really do have such a tough job sometimes when they're dealing with somebody's pet, somebody's in distress, maybe somebody's really anxious. We all know that those emotions within a veterinary practice can be huge, and then they work incredibly long hours, and veterinary nurses seem to be, bless them, working across sometimes multiple places as well. So sometimes just giving them that nod that says, I can see you, I can see how hard you're working, and I'm really sorry that I'm bringing a hedgehog in for a moment as well, because I've just added to your list, haven't I, really? That worked, and that approach with the team meant they sort of almost wrapped around us as well. So it sort of becomes sort of two-handed. And the first time that they said, one of our vets said to us, oh, come through to the back room. And I'm sure those of you who are really experienced rehabbers, and there's people here tonight who are much, much, much more experienced than we are, who will be so used to those sorts of relationships. But as a new rescuer and as somebody working, and then having that come through to the back room so we can have a look at this together, or the first time your vet rings you or your veterinary nurses ring you to ask for your opinion of something, or to run something past you, you realise that pivot is changing, where we spent the first, while being the one sort of asking and leaning a lot on them for the support, and then it tips, doesn't it? And you start to realise that there's this almost professional playing field that says we know the limit of our scope of capability, but also what we should and shouldn't be doing. We are definitely not in their league. We are not vets, we're not veterinary nurses. However, they really respect what we do and what we know. And when you can feel that is becoming a more equal relationship, it's a really lovely, lovely feeling, and one we never take for granted. So it is, of course, it's saying please and thank yous, and it's celebrating. So if a vet works with a hedgehog with us, we will post about it. We will make sure we tag in those people, those vets. We will make sure that we're saying thank you publicly. We say it in the waiting room. We say it outwardly on social media. And believe you, every talk we ever give, because whether that's worked out for our trustees report, I've spoken to 395 people this year alone, doing talks on top of everything else. And every single one of those 395 people will have left one of my talks knowing that the vets that we work with, they'll know who they are, they'll know what we think of them and how well they work with us. That is, if you put it back into business terms, that's huge amount of good PR. And that's, you have to remember that we have to remember they're a business. So actually, that's really powerful. They couldn't pay for that level of PR. So that's a way we give back, and it's a way to praise and thank, but in different forums. As far as CPD opportunities are concerned, again, it's saying we regularly will send things. If we find an interesting article, we know they're not going to have time to read everything. We'll try and write a synopsis, or we'll send someone an email. We've got lots of them, will WhatsApp and message different ways. We'll send things through just as a CPD opportunity, because just the same way as anybody works in healthcare, education, lots of other businesses, we all have to have a certain number of hours CPD. And actually finding your professional development is often the hardest part of doing any of these things. So if a veterinary nurse has a document that we've sent through, they can put that down as some of their CPD. So it all goes towards what they're doing as well. So actually we're making their lives easier, but at the same time, we're placing hedgehogs and hedgehog information back in front of them. So things like are just even the basics, your fluid charts, your treatment protocols, the little tips, sharing those makes a huge difference, because even if they don't follow them all the time, or it's different people in, you will find that we've found that our vets have actually really got that. It's embedded, but takes time. When it comes to investing in people, we offered last year to take members of staff from any of the vets that we work with to come with us to the Hedgehog Conference, to the International Hedgehog Conference. It was a big step, and we actually took a vet and a veterinary nurse with us in the end. We paid. And that was a huge leap of faith on our part. But they deserve that. They deserve having what we are trying to do. They are doing this on top of. So we did take them with us, and we paid for the accommodation, and we paid for the course as well, which was, and I certainly wouldn't hesitate to do it again, although I'm not sure I'll be doing it for Denmark. I'm not flying anybody anywhere. I can wait till it comes back again. But those sorts of things, that's an extreme example. But we'll say if there's a course in the area, and just make sure that they're aware, and whether or not that anybody would like to, because most of the time, of course, they won't have time, capacity, be able to, maybe be interested, but you will find that odd person that does want to. And keeping those relationships going even when it's quieter. So I know we were just saying that we're all a bit busier than we often are at different times of year, but obviously there's key times when we're so, I feel like we may as well move into the vets. And then there's other times when it does get quieter in what we're doing. So trying to just message every so often, trying to just keep that relationship there, so it's not all feast and famine, has worked really well for us as well. Actually, I'm just going to go back slightly, because the investing in people part, what I wanted to say there as well is that it's finding those people who are the gold dust. And it's in every organisation, people move and people change. And it's about fostering the culture that says, actually, working alongside this particular rescue or these particular people is worthwhile. But finding those people who are your little champions, and they exist in every single practice, they're there somewhere, whether it's front of house team, whether it's a veterinary nurse, or whether it's the vet themselves, but the little champion that you know is kind of thinks you're doing a good thing and is willing to sort of champion that with other people within the organisation, because they will be accountable to a board of directors, they will be accountable to stakeholders, shareholders, whoever they're owned by, whatever they're working under. So you want someone to sort of fly the flag and say, yes, we should be doing this, and it is worthwhile. And those people, because again, investing in them, they're going to keep that moving forward for us even without us knowing it. And I know that there's probably conversations going on sometimes that we are completely oblivious of. So we were braver last year, and actually, instead of, I suppose, letting the vets ask us when they needed things sometimes as well, or just sharing the odd bit, we offered to do an awareness talk for one of our vets that we work with. So this was Oakham Veterinary Hospital, and Oakham Veterinary Hospital invited us across and asked us if we'd go and do like an awareness talk. We had vets, vet nurses, admin staff. It was fantastic, and this was just a little bit that they put up, and that is a huge shift, I suppose, in terms of, I think about where we came from and being those quite worried individuals about were we doing the right thing, to standing in front of a team of very qualified people who really know their stuff and saying, this is what we know about hedgehogs. And it gave us real confidence. We did it with a team we felt really comfortable with, and it's given us real confidence to go and do that now with other teams. And now I actively reach out to teams that are not people we work with so often, because we all know the biggest risk in wildlife rehabilitation, I think, is losing your veterinary support. Some change somewhere, something means that you haven't got that. And I think that will be the thing that will keep me awake at night. And when we looked at it, because we did become a charity in 2024, when we were looking at our risks as a charity, what is the biggest risk? And the first thing we put down was the risk is losing our veterinary support, because again, no vet, I really don't think you should be doing rehabilitation. And we've now moved to the position where we really try to make sure we are spreading our wings a little bit. We've always worked with any vet that contacts us about a hedgehog, but we're working with more and more vets as time goes on, and we're being invited to speak to more and more vets. And they watch each other. They're just like rescues, I've discovered. They watch each other. So when one vet posts that they've spoken to a rescue or that they're working with, it's amazing how fast, and somebody else will say, oh, could you come and do that here? I don't charge them. It's not about us as a charity or as a rescue. It's just pure awareness. It's the same for me as going to do any other talk, if you see what I mean. So that for me is trying to protect us for the long term, which it's all about making sure that we can do the best for the future hedgehogs in need, isn't it? So I would rather have that approach across lots of vets if I possibly can, even though I've got my main vet, which thank goodness we do. So reaching out sometimes, and the reason I've put it's not just the vets and RVNs is because your front of house team are the first person that is going to take that phone call from a member of the public and getting them to get the right messages. So one of the things we did when we've done the awareness talks is we've created a sheet that we take, and I'm more than happy to share it with anybody. It's not saying it's perfect, because it isn't, but we've created a piece of an A4 sheet that can be laminated, that they can have on a desk, so that when a member of the public rings in, I found a hedgehog out in the day, whatever it may be, and it's almost sort of a set of triage questions, especially when we're thinking in the summertime about those mums that shouldn't be collected, because we all know what happens with that hedgehog out in the day that actually is a lactating female that has just been taken away from her nest accidentally. But by placing some of these things down on a very simple document that they can all look at, really empowers those people who are taking the phone call. It also then helps those veterinary nurses who are, let's face it, bless them, the first people who often are working with the hedgehogs, and having to use that knowledge that they've got to kind of go, oh, hang on a minute, this is a big female. Yes, I can see she's lactating, and we all know that's quite tricky sometimes to discover. But even just to stop and question means that it's a fantastic step forward to, I've got a hedgehog, it's in the box, I'll call a rescue and find someone to take it. So that sheet went down so well at one vet's, it's now gone out to quite a few of them. And it's often the thing that I know people comment on because they found it sort of practically useful in the job that they're doing. I asked our vets, not all of them, but I've spoken to a few individuals and said, so what do you think about working with us? Why do you work with us? Or what are the benefits of working with us? And that first one wasn't the thing I thought they were going to say first. It genuinely wasn't. But the fact that this particular lady said to me, particular vet this was, as vets, we're not the experts in the field of wildlife rehabilitation, but your commitment to CPD means we feel very comfortable with you. She said, I know you don't know everything, but you know you don't know everything. But I know you're always learning. And that was that, it really does matter to them that we show them what we're doing when we're doing it. So again, it comes back to those little things, doesn't it? Like the Facebook posts that say, oh, we've been doing an online training course tonight with Secret World, for example, because you don't always have to tell them everything, but they do watch, because their reputation is hanging in the balance with when they work with a rescue. So that was a really good one. You never mind waiting. It's so hard when we're rescues to want that hedgehog that we can see is in pain, that we can see has a significant fracture, for example, seen now. It feels like the biggest priority in the world, the same way as it would if it was my little dog Willow, because we're so connected into what we're doing. But vets, often if they're dealing with other things, we won't be the top of that list. And yes, I'd love to be the top of the list every time. But I never ever want them to feel like that. I always want them to feel that you never mind waiting. So when they said that, I thought, wow, yeah, that's true, because we will always say, can you possibly, is there any chance? And how can I help? Can I drop it off and you can see it during the day? I will drop off an animal with either it written, emailed, whichever way they want me, to make sure, because if I can make it as easy as possible for them to see what my concerns are and to work with me, I've taken the pressure off, because they have so much pressure when they're dealing with their customers and their clients. But equally, if I was in there with my little dog, I would be demanding to be top of the tree, and I wouldn't care about anybody else. You're so organised. That just made me laugh, because I like everything to be labelled, organised. Nothing goes in and out without those sorts of things, but that's just me. But it's good that they feel like that. They don't need to know I'm really a swan and that I'm pedaling away like this underneath. They think I'm organised. That's great. You all share information was a lovely one, and you engage with all vets locally. And again, that was key, because I actually pushed that person and said, oh, I wasn't sure if you'd mind. I wasn't sure if there was a bit of professional rivalry, or whether. She said, no, not at all. She said, because actually it is hard for us to do that, because we are in our boxes the same way as I am in my business capacity. However, we shouldn't feel like that as rehabbers. We should feel we're working for the good of hedgehogs or birds or whatever we're working with. So to try and get that spread, for me, that's about safety for my charity and to be able to be here if there's ever a change. But for them, they see it as a positive. And you say no sometimes and know your limits. I think we all probably suffer from a little bit of feeling like we're letting them down when we say no, when they ring and say, I've got a hedgehog, and you go, I just can't. I just don't know where to put it. I have no more hours in the day. I just don't know. I can't squeeze another one in. And a good veterinary team will not see that as a negative. They'll see that as a positive, because they know that you're then keeping your standards and that you're not trying to burn yourself out. And that actually, when they said that, I thought, yeah, they're right. It's the hardest thing to do, and we've all probably taken more than we should do it sometimes. But what a lovely, lovely reflection. And that's them recognizing how hard what we all do is as well. So I'd say as a case study for us, it's grown so slowly from being frightened, green novices, those people that were frightened to put something even onto a forum to say, what should I use to treat? Because we just knew we were such beginners, to being down the line where it's not that many years, but I feel quite comfortable talking to any vet, any veterinary nurse, and having those conversations regularly. is just extraordinary, but it's developed so slowly for us, alongside little tiny bits of drip feeding. They're always welcome in. I've invited veterinary nurses in when they've dropped off hedgehogs before. And in fact, I invited one veterinary nurse in and said, oh, if you've got a minute, do you want to just bring it in with you so you can see what's the setup is? And she stood in our main room and just went, well, this isn't what I thought a rescue was like at all. And they're not a vet we normally work with. And she said, wow, I didn't even think. I just kind of thought it was a very different setup. And then they invited us across to do a talk in which they closed the entire vets for the afternoon for an hour and a half and everyone came to the training, which just shows that little one moment. Invite them in, be proud of what we do, and let them see. So it's definitely, for me, reputation, theirs and ours. Appreciation has to be, we've got to recognise how hard and what they do, and then tell everyone, praise them, speak about them, try to make sure that that we're an extension of what they're doing as well, so that they're never going to be looking at something I've done or put up there and think, oh, that doesn't fit with our core values. Know what their core values are as a business. If it's your main vets, they will have those core values. They will be published somewhere. So ask them what they are, if not. And then make it really easy for them. Try and do as much that you can, that I could, to try and make sure that working with us is easy. I do take chocolates in, of course I do, every so often. We all do that. We've all done the box of chocolates, we've all done the thank yous, we've all done those moments, but those aren't the things that long-term work, are they? It's making sure that they feel reputationally and safe, and they also feel proud of what they do. And I didn't write that on there, I should have done. They've got to feel as proud as we do, because we should all be so proud of what we do for wildlife. Because if it wasn't for people like us all giving our time to wildlife, we'd be in a much poorer place, and we need them to do that. So make them feel proud of that. Make them feel that actually it's something that they're doing that's an altruistic thing. Even though there's money exchanging, because yes, you do pay for services sometimes, and it's all different in different vets and different places, of course, but they have every right to feel as proud as we do, but they may not even realise that. So it's trying to label it. I suppose that's the key. So for me, I did think, gosh, am I a bit of a manipulator in how I work with people? But I think it isn't. I think it is realizing that value. So I've put that, finally make it realize it's worth their while. This was a post by our main vet. So this is the Rutland Veterinary Centre. And this was a post they put up recently, just sort of saying we work with the pricklebacks, and bless them, it was lovely they added in the wildlife care badge, because of course they come to do our vet visits, so they know the paperwork, they understand all of that. But I highlighted on the bottom there, and I can see one of our rescues is highlighted because they happen to have been the last one to like it. Sorry, that person. But 34 comments and 9 shares. Now, yes, I did beg everybody to go on there and say, just give it a like. Please pop on and give it a like, because their usual post interactions, if you look back, are 2 or 3 people, 4 or 5 people, 5 or 6 people. That's your average. They put one thing up about a hedgehog rescue and they had 34 comments, 9 shares, and more traffic than they'd had in. And it's that. It's sort of saying, look, what you do when you work with wildlife goes well beyond your waiting room and also comes back. And that's the win-win, really, isn't it, for them? So it was just a very recent way of being really obvious about it. So I hope that helps. I'm sorry if it feels like you're thinking, goodness me, I've just been taught to suck eggs, and I really didn't want it to feel like we're saying this is how to do it, because it really isn't. It was just so lovely to be invited to tell people how we got here, because it's made me reflect. And hopefully there's some bits in there that might help, especially if, I think, somebody said they were new and starting out, because setting your tone and keeping your tone is so important for future working with vets. And so we all perhaps ought to look back and think how proud we are of the way we do work with all of our vets. And I'm sure all of you've got some fantastic things to tell us about as well. So I really hope that helps. Thank you, Alana.